Is there a chance that you are going to become a refugee because of AI? To understand this question, let me tell you a brief story. A guy that I met a few years ago, about 10 years ago, when my wife and I lived for the first time in Istanbul. So this guy, he was a computer science student in Aleppo, in Syria. And the reason why he was in Istanbul is because sometime before, about 1 year before, he went on vacations to Turkey, to a beach in Turkey, because it's kind of close to Aleppo. And about 2 weeks later, when he tried to come back home, he couldn't because the border was closed. The reason why it was closed it's because a conflict started in Syria that now we know quite a lot about, and it took more than 10 years, and he basically became a refugee in Turkey because of that. He didn't plan to go to Turkey to flee from a war zone or anything like that. He was just having his vacations and then he couldn't come back home anymore. So the feeling that he had while he was in Turkey was this feeling of a person that basically couldn't come back home. And of course, many other people over the years had to flee from Syria and become refugees in Turkey and in other parts of Europe as well. And why am I telling you this story? Because this feeling of not being able to come back home, which is one of the feelings that refugees in general have. This is a feeling that is becoming very present in the lives of many other people that are not Syrians, that are not really refugees, but they are feeling the same because they can't come back to their previous life. And what do I mean by that? So some time ago, my wife decided to migrate to a new career and she decided to become a wedding photographer. The moment when she decided to do this was this moment in history where people were beginning to use digital cameras way more often. And in the past, many photographers were basically using film cameras, analogic cameras. She went into this market exactly in the time when people were beginning to use more and more digital cameras professionally. And this was great for her because she came from a computer science background, so she could deal very well with technology. But many of those photographers that were very used to deal with film and they were excellent at what they did, they really weren't very tech savvy. So it was very hard for them to get used to this new technology, the new digital cameras. And many of them suffered a lot, while some of them managed to make this transition as well. But for those that couldn't make this transition, in a certain sense, they began to feel also as like refugees, not so much because they couldn't come back to the territory, to their homeland, but mostly because they couldn't come back to this old times when they just could do their pictures using film. So now psychologically they felt like in a new land, a land that they didn't know, and they felt that they couldn't come back. And in fact, they couldn't come back because the film technology pretty much died. And if the photographer didn't make this transition to the digital camera, they basically lost all of their income and they couldn't anymore work with that. So why is this important now? So as you certainly have noticed, AI has become something very present in the lives of pretty much everybody. At the very least, it has been affecting more and more, if not already affecting, at least we are hearing about it all of the time. And the reason for that is because it's really a new technology that is transforming the world in a scale and in a speed that we've never seen before. So for many people that are going through this phase now, it feels like we are entering into this new land where we don't understand things quite well and we feel like nostalgic about the old days. And we would like to be able to come back to those old days, to what we could understand, but now we can't come back anymore. So in that sense, we kind of feel like refugees. It's not the same. Refugees have to deal with many other things, but this feeling of not being able to come back home, it's a feeling that is kind of becoming normal for many of us at this point, because of AI. So having said that, we have to understand that there are refugees and refugees. I mean, even like real refugees. And what do I mean by that? So at this moment now, I'm in a city in Albania, and every day I go to a cafe to work, and as I am there, I am surrounded by other people that are also working there. And most of the time, among those people, there are refugees, real refugees. And those refugees, most of the time, they are Ukrainian refugees. Those Ukrainian refugees, they are not what you would expect of a refugee that you see on the news, like, like poor people trying to get to an European country for opportunities and all of that. It's not like that at all. Those are people that most of the time, they came from like middle class or upper middle class in Ukraine. They were doing fine. They had good jobs. Most of the time they work online and they are quite well educated and they are just working there with us in these cafes. But the thing is, at this moment, very complicated for them to be in Ukraine because of the war there. So they are here. Many of them are here or are spread in other parts of Europe, in other parts of the world. And this happens with the Ukrainians. This happens also with many Russians. 2 years ago, we were living in Antalya, in Turkey. When we were in the cafes there, most of the time we were surrounded by Russians because many of the Russians also left Russia so that they wouldn't be called to go to this war with Ukraine. So they were also refugees there. But all of them, those are people, very well educated people. As I said, they are doing well. But they now see that they can't really come back to their homeland. So those are people that in a sense, they feel like they don't have another option. They don't have the option of coming back home. But those are not the only refugees that we see. Here in this very city, we also see other people that are kind of like refugees, but they are not real refugees. But they also feel like they can't come back home, or at least they shouldn't. So every day I go to the gym, and in the gym there is this gentleman. It's an old guy and he is Italian. And I asked him the other day, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I've been living here for 2 years. I said, why? Well, because I'm a pensioner in Italy and it's very expensive to live in Italy nowadays. So if I live here, I have a much better life here with my pension from Italy. And for many other Italians that are from the private sector, they live here because on top of having a better life here, they don't have to pay the taxes here that they would have to pay in Italy that are very, very high. So in the end of the day, they make more money here and they live better here if they were living in Italy. And as a matter of fact, it turns out that there are many Italians living in this city here. So much so that last night I was having dinner with my wife in a restaurant and most of the tables around us were with Italians. In fact, they are not tourists. Most of them are residents. They are living here for the very reason that this person said. So what we are seeing is that, oh, and by the way, there are many Americans also living here. Same situation. People that would have to spend a lot to live as pensioners, retirees in the US, but they find that it's much better to be living here. There are people from the UK, there are people from Australia, lots of foreigners living here. They are not exactly refugees, but they feel like they can't really live in their homeland anymore, or they shouldn't, and that's why they chose to be here. But the thing is, those people, they have a choice in a sense, while some other refugees, they don't really have a choice. Okay, so what all of this has to do with you? Now, with the AI, some people facing all of this technological change, they feel that they are kind of oppressed by this and they feel nostalgic about the old days. They would like to be able to come back to these old days when they could just do their work in the way they were used to, where they could just have their lives the way it used to be. Now they resent that they can't do this anymore. Some of those people actually lost their job or are about to lose their job. So just to give an example, I was the other day preparing some classes. I needed some slides for these classes and I usually create some illustrations for this, and I had an illustrator that I worked with to do this. But nowadays, AI can do those illustrations much faster. Like in just a few seconds, AI can do illustrations that are even better than what my illustrator could do. So now I basically use AI for the illustration, and I'm not the only one, obviously. So are there many illustrators that are facing a big problem from now on? Yes, you bet. Have you ever tried to do a translation with AI? If you don't, try. You will be surprised by the insane quality of the translation, and it takes just a few seconds. So translators are being affected by this. Oh yeah, you bet. But they are not the only ones. Many professions are being affected. Have you seen what happens with lawyers, for instance? If you need to craft a contract, in the past, you might have needed to hire a lawyer to do this for you. Now you can basically ask AI to do the same contract, and it will probably do this in just a few seconds. It might be even better than what you would get after paying a big fee for a lawyer. So many professionals are having to deal with the fact that AI will, in a sense, replace them or change the way they work. And this is very serious. So in this sense, maybe for many of us, this is the last year of the lives that we were used to live, because from now on things are going to be very different because of AI. And all of this sounds like really bad news, but it's not as bad as it sounds. Fortunately, AI can be a big obstacle for many of us, but it can also be a fantastic tool to take us to a new place. A new place that might be even better than the place where we used to live before. And what do I mean by that? It turns out that my wife really loves to study Russian. She has been studying Russian for years now. Recently, she began to use AI more and more to help us in this process. So basically now she has this AI tutor that helps her every single day in basic situations of the daily life. If something comes up, she can immediately talk to this AI tutor and ask questions about what happened and try to learn more. So for instance, just before recording this video, I took a shower, and after she went and took a shower. When she went to take the shower, the water wasn't as hot anymore, and there wasn't enough time for the boiler to heat more water. So she interrupted her shower a little bit before she expected, and as soon as she finished the shower, she got her cell phone and she told this story to this AI tutor. And the AI tutor gave her all the vocabulary connected to this situation of taking a shower and the hot water and now the cold water and the heater and all of that. And now she learned about this. She didn't have to wait until she would have a class and she would meet with her actual teacher to ask her about those things. Now she immediately had a chance to learn about this. So what I mean by that is that AI now is a fantastic tool for us to learn all kinds of things and to learn new and interesting things. But, and that's a very big but. You remember when I told you about the photographers in the past? There were a few that decided that they would embrace the digital technology, while others, they resisted and they resented. So for those that embraced it, things got much better for them. But for those that resisted, things got much worse. And when we think about learning and when we think about dealing with a new technology, we need to understand this because this is very important. When we learn, we really learn well when we are interested. That's why my wife learns Russian so much, because she is so much interested in that. And now she has tools, better and better tools, with the help of AI to learn faster than ever. If you look at the changes that are happening now and you resist them, if you are resentful about them, you will struggle to deal with them. But if, on the other hand, you decide that, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for me to update myself, to update my life, maybe I'll look at this as a new adventure in my life, as something that can actually be very interesting. What might I find if I go to this new place? Now, it's different. It's like going to a new country that you chose and that you want to experience. If you do that, and if you actually use AI to help you in this process, maybe all of this change that we are all going to face are going to be much easier to deal with than if you resist them. So be careful about how you are going to deal with this AI future. You might resist it, but you might as well look at this as the biggest adventure of our lives. I know it might not look like this for some of us at this moment because of the things that are already changing. But believe me, if we try and if we look at all the opportunities that AI is bringing in terms of learning, we might be surprised. So if you haven't done this yet, check it out. You might actually like it in the end.